Hey, this is Angela with this week's Living the Shift. So, are you happy or are you ecstatic with your life? Are you just content? Are you unhappy? There are a lot of questions that we never stop to truly ask ourselves, and they have some really important connotations to them in terms of our spirituality and on our spiritual journey and shifting ourselves into this new paradigm of living that we're working on. And what I mean is this. So many of us are taught, and it's truly what we're taught. We're taught by our families, our friends, our peers, those who are around us, what it is we should grow up to do, what we want to do to make ourselves happy. That do we want to be married and have the 2.5 kids and the white picket fence and the dog? Do we want to live a life of adventure? Do we want to do this? Do we want to do that? And so many of our motivations for what we say we want, the box of the picture that we want to portray of ourselves, that we feel will make us happy if we attain it, that we don't even realize that many times those motivations truly come from what we've been taught versus what our heart is telling us. So what's happened is we have come into this dual issue, right? One is this level of complacency when we say, okay, well, I've done that. And then we also have this level of self-disgust, self-hatred or dislike because of the fact that we are not creating that picture that we think in our minds is what we really want. So when that happens, so many people will come to me and they'll be like, well, I'm in my 40s, I don't have kids, I've never been married, and I look at my sister, my brother, or my friends, and blah, 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 and they all have this, and I just feel like, I'm did something wrong because I don't have that. So then my question is always, why do you want that? There was somebody I was speaking to one time where she really, really got sort of obsessed about that, and would talk about her sister and her sister's life and da-da-da-da. And finally I was like, why do you want that? And she just said, well, that's how everybody, looks at her as perfect. And I'm like, okay, first of all, everything has issues, everything has challenges, everything has things we have to overcome. But the key is she's talking to me, and then I hear from her higher self override what she's talking, and I hear that is just not what we're here to do. That is not what we're here to do. So many times what's happening is we are trying to let our minds, again, it goes back to this whole ego running the show here at the third dimension up until now. And we're trying to let our minds tell us from our experiences, our culture, our peers, our families, and our friends what it is we want and what's going to make us happy, quote unquote. And so if we attain that, what happens when we attain that and it's not what our heart really wants, and we're going, not all that awesome, or it's okay, but I'm sort of bored now, And that has nothing to do with wanting more. That has to do with that you're not attaining the happiness, the true happiness that will come from your heart versus what your mind has developed as the picture of what it's supposed to be. So essentially, for this particular person, she came here to help others. She works with handicapped children, and she does an excellent job at it, and she can devote her life and time to it, and she loves it. Well, so there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not looking like this picture perfect thing, and she has such stories to tell, and she's been through so much herself, and she wants to write a book, and I told her absolutely. But it doesn't look anything near what her sister's life is like, and she finally let go of that. But there are so many people that I see that are just perfect, same kind of situation, different person, different family, different, group. So that's this one level, right? This one level of, well, I'm unhappy with myself. I hate myself because I'm not like this person, because I'm not like somebody else. I'm not like my neighbors. I don't have a BMW like, my best friend has, or something like that. And that's all the mind. That's the ego. Because anything that has to compare and put a hierarchy on something as being better or for worse is based on duality. And the ego is really what has brought us through that, right? So the next part of that has to do with complacency. And actually when we do attain that, so say we do attain that picture of what we had thought we wanted, and we're saying, okay, all right, I'm okay, I'm comfortable, right? Sometimes being there, and that's where a good majority of people are, being there is almost less motivating than having some horrible situation or having something that you totally need to get yourself out of. Because when you are in some horrible situation where you feel like you're deprived of what it is your heart wants, then you will work hard to get out of that, right? You will you'll be motivated to find something more. But many times we get to this point of complacency of, okay, well, I've got that, house and the spouse and the 2.5 kids and the fence and the dog and yada, yada, yada. And it's okay. And there's no resistance. There's no huge resistance, except what happens is the more and longer we go with that, and the more the heart is really wanting to get up and go and do it at once, there'll be this yearning for something else. There'll be this yearning to do something that you deprived yourself of because it didn't fit into that box. So when I say that sometimes to people, is sometimes it's worse to be okay or fair or content than it is to be horrible, because at least then when you're horrible you have motivation to change. So right now we're shifting into this whole new way of living. We're shifting into realizing and remembering, first of all, that we are the divine. Second of all, that there are no boxes, that we create the boxes and we can just erase them and we can create our own. We can create our own reality, and that's what we do. And when we can do that, and we can let go of judgment and criticism and let go of that caring about what other people think of us, because again, that's ego. And how many times I've talked about that lovely quote, it's none of our business what other people think of us, because that's their journey, that's their part of the journey. And when we can release all of that, and we can finally stop and listen to our heart, we can release all of this underlying irritation, all these things that we have in our lives. Why do you think we have so many people that have allergies, like all these kind of allergies? Why do we have so many people with chronic illnesses? Because what happens is there's this overtone of complacency, this overtone of I'm okay and I can deal with this. I can deal with this. It makes me think of when I took psychology in college, right? And we were talking about negative reinforcement, positive reinforcement, and negative reinforcement. And so when you work from the mind, positive reinforcement is when you do something and you're rewarded for it, you do it again because you expect reward, and then that creates a habit. Negative reinforcement is when you have a negative stimulus that is poking at you all the time and irritating you and hurting you or bothering you, that the removal of that stimulus is a huge motivation for us, because it's then removed and we're not irritated and uncomfortable and hurt or whatever. And that's negative reinforcement. So in essence, when we're okay, many times that's actually sort of a negative reinforcement, because what happens is, well, maybe sometimes we had a horrible time, we had some horrible relationships, we had a horrible situation, and then we wanted to get out of it, and then we got out of it and just got okay. And once we get to this okay point, we're like, wow, I'm so glad to have gotten rid of that other stuff. And once you do that, then you lose that motivation to change, because you're like, okay, I'm okay now. So then what happens is then we get okay, but then there's still some underlying irritations. If the heart's not being attended to, if the higher purpose, the higher soul is not being attended to, then eventually you will build up again multiple irritations, different kinds of little irritations, and that causes these little chronic things, little allergies and big allergies, and just chronic issues that we have. And many times we can't find the cause of them, because we're like, okay, well, my life is okay. So what's the deal? What's the underlying thing? Because we have so buried it, because we said, okay, but we attain this picture. We have this picture of what we want to be. And this is what we are. This is where we wanted. And so now I'm not going to look at this other stuff because I'm happy where I want to be. And we hold on to that so desperately sometimes that we say, that's where marriages fall apart and homes fall apart, because many times somebody gets to this place, they get to this place of complacency, and they're not making themselves happy and ecstatic and magnificent, which is what all of our birthrights are. But because we got to this point of what others expected of us, and it's okay and acceptable, then we just sort of stop and say, okay, it's all right. And then we have all these other underlying things that will then build up over time and become chronic physical issues many times. Or sometimes what will happen is we'll get to a point where the soul will finally, the heart, the higher self will finally step forward and say, this is not what we're here to do. You had your respite, you had your resting period, and now it's time for us to go and have an awesome, amazing time. And that's what we're coming into right now, is we are ripping off the Band-Aid to all this like resistance and hurt and pain and fear and anger and resentment, all that kind of stuff. And we are working into our level of magnificence that we all have, this divinity that we have within us. And by our rights of divinity, we deserve to be ecstatic and blissful and love every minute of our day, love every moment of our lives, and enjoy and embrace what we are doing, and not caring and not having an issue with what others think about us, as long as we are truly in our truth, in our highest and best love, and in happiness and bliss. So sometimes, I'll go back to the beginning, sometimes it is easier to get someone to move out of that this is horrible to this magnificent level than it is to get somebody who's in this, it's okay, it's acceptable, I can live with this, to the next level, because it becomes scary. Well, what if it's not magnificent? What if then I go back to horrible? That's what that motivation is. Well, I'm in this like safe zone, I'm in the neutral zone right now, but what about that happiness and that bliss? And wouldn't you love to be just happy and in love and truth and ecstatic all the time? That's our goal. That's where we're going. So words for thought, food for thought. Think about that in your life, what it is that you're complacent about, and what it is that is okay, that you're okay and happy and content with, but you could do better, that you know that your heart could sing and be just blissful every day, and start to work towards that one step at a time. Because it might be scary to jump off that cliff because of that question, what if it's not as comfortable or as neutral as it is now? But if we take the chance, it's like that whole no risk, no reward. If we put the energy towards it, the universe will conspire to help us. So on that, I'm going to let you go. We'll talk to you next week. This is Angela with this week's Living the Shift.